Hey guys, tonight we slip into stiff collars, scratchy lace, and candlelight so dim you'll trip over your own insecurities. We're heading back to a time when dating meant ritual, restraint, and really uncomfortable shoes. This isn't some heart-fluttering romance in a flower-filled garden. This is Victorian courtship, and you have a date. In a parlor, with a person you barely know, and roughly 14 layers of silent judgment. Now, fair warning, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're already running late. The maid has brought up your corset or waistcoat, and either way, there are too many hooks, no stretch, and not enough air. You wrestle with fabric that has no mercy, shoes that weren't made for walking, and hair that has to look like you didn't try even though you absolutely did. A lot. In the 1870s, getting ready for a date wasn't a matter of spritzing cologne and checking your phone. It was a full-scale operation involving combs carved from ivory, beard wax made from bear fat, and sometimes literal lead-based powder to lighten your face. Yes, lead. Historians still argue whether people knew how dangerous it was or just didn't care, because pale meant posh. You spill hair tonic down your only clean shirt. You sneeze violently after inhaling too much rose water. And your reflection in the mirror tells you the truth no one else will. You look like you're going to faint during a poetry recital. Meanwhile, servants are hovering. One hands you your gloves, soft leather, completely impractical for any tactile task. Another delivers your calling card in an envelope so crisp it could slice a cucumber. Your name is printed in a Gothic serif font that screams, "I own land," even if you actually don't. And let's not forget the corset, or the high collar, depending on your assigned outfit. You bend wrong, and suddenly you're tasting linen and regret. These garments were designed less for comfort and more for posture, modesty, and the gentle reminder that romance isn't supposed to be relaxing. You try to sit to gather your thoughts, but your spine won't let you. Victorian posture was part status signal, part survival tactic. A slouching suitor was a scandal waiting to happen. You stiffen, you sweat, you wonder if one date is worth all this. By the time the carriage pulls up, you've reapplied your perfume 3 times, dropped your handkerchief twice, and made peace with the fact that your gloves are mismatched, but only slightly, so maybe no one will notice. They definitely will. One last look in the mirror. One last sigh. You square your shoulders, nod at the maid, and march out the door like a condemned noble on the way to the guillotine. And that's just the prep. The carriage ride is supposed to be the romantic part, the moment in every period drama where the camera pans wide, the wheels clatter over cobblestone, and the music swells with expectation. But for you, it's nausea, cold toes, and a rattling sense of doom. The first thing to hit you is the smell. Carriages in the Victorian era weren't exactly sanitized. You're sitting on faded velvet cushions that have absorbed decades of damp wool, cheap cologne, and questionable choices. The moment you shift your weight, a cloud of powdered mildew and horse-drawn history drifts up around you. Next comes the motion. The streets are uneven, the suspension is symbolic at best, and every jolt sends your stomach into negotiations. You cling to the armrest, which is really just a slightly padded plank, and try not to think about the fact that this outfit was not designed for motion. Corset, still tight, collar, still digging into your throat, and the feather in your hat keeps poking the carriage ceiling. You're trying to look serene. That's what a proper suitor does. But your boots are wet from a puddle, your cuff is smeared with coal dust, and you're fairly certain that clattering noise from outside means your driver just ran over someone's wash basin. There's a reason Victorian city folk preferred staying home. The journey drags on. You pass lamplit windows, flickering gaslights, and one ominous figure selling eels in the fog. You try not to make eye contact. Historians still debate whether Victorian city rides were more dangerous because of traffic or crime, but everyone agrees they were not relaxing. Especially when you arrive late. You finally pull up to the townhouse. It looms like a well-mannered fortress. Stone steps, wrought iron, a door so polished you can see your own panicked expression. The driver hops down, opens the door with a flourish, and you try to exit gracefully. You do not exit gracefully. You nearly trip on your own coattails or skirt hem, and when your boot hits the bottom step, it skids on something slick. You recover barely, with a jerky half-bow to no one in particular. A passing cat stares at you with contempt. You straighten your posture. The wind flaps your coat, slapping your leg like a disapproving aunt. You are officially here. But something's wrong. Your gloves are gone. You left them in the carriage. You turn, too late. The driver's already rolled away, lost in the fog and hoofbeats. You are gloveless. A scandal, a horror, a faux pas so grave it could undo the entire evening. Gloves, after all, weren't just accessories. They were shields, signals, and social armor. You check your pockets. Nothing. You contemplate using your handkerchief as makeshift hand wraps, but realize that showing up wrapped like a prize fighter probably won't help. The door looms closer. Your heart thuds like carriage wheels in your chest. It's not even the date yet. You haven't even made it inside. And already, your hair is frizzy, your stomach is spinning, and you're about to ring a bell that will summon an ancient butler who can smell fear. You take a breath. Steady your hand. Reach for the door pull. Let's hope the parlor has seating. You're going to need it. The door doesn't swing open right away. It lingers, just long enough for your internal panic to bloom like a Victorian morning lily. You stand there, hand twitching, wondering if you pulled the bell too hard, not hard enough, or somehow both. The silence feels personal, accusatory. Then, finally, click. The heavy door creaks open, and there he is, the butler. He's older than sin, and twice as well pressed. His expression could curdle milk. One eyebrow arches slightly, not enough to be rude, just enough to communicate, I know you're not worthy, but I'm being paid to let you in anyway. You try to offer a pleasant smile. It comes out more like a grimace. Your card, sir, he murmurs, with a voice like oiled mahogany. You fumble for your calling card, which now looks a little too bent, a little too smudged. Still, you hand it over like it's your last defense in a trial. He glances at it with the clinical detachment of someone mentally judging your entire family tree. Then, with a nod so slight it might be imaginary, he steps back and ushers you in. You cross the threshold. The hallway is dim, echoing, and smells faintly of boiled cabbage and fireplace ash, two staples of the well-to-do Victorian household. The wallpaper is floral, the carpet patterned, and the temperature a solid 4 degrees below comfort. You're escorted to the drawing room, slowly, as if your footsteps are being evaluated for rhythm, weight, and social grace. The butler disappears, leaving you standing in a room where silence has its own echo. Now what? You glance around. A faint ticking from the clock on the mantel. An armchair by the fire, empty. A piano in the corner, its keys covered, silently judging. And the parlor table, where your date's family portraits stare at you like ancestors, wondering how this one got in. You spot a chair and sit, instantly regretting it. Victorian furniture was not designed for comfort. The armrests are too high, the cushion too low, and your knees are at a confused angle. Worse, you've forgotten what to do with your hands. Fold them, drape them, hide them under a throw pillow. But no, there's a You're not supposed to sit unless invited. You realize this too late? A creak in the hallway signals someone's approach. You shoot to your feet like you've just been accused of stealing the silver. Your heart's doing a polka in your chest. Your hat is slightly askew, and your hands, still ungloved, feel enormous. Into the room walks your date's mother. This was supposed to be a simple date, a polite tea, maybe a piano piece, but now you're being visually scanned by someone who once flirted with Lord Byron and survived. "Good evening," she says, not smiling, not unkind, but very aware that you are here, in her space, courting her daughter or son, with the decorum of a confused sheep. You bow, it's awkward. She gestures toward the same chair you just abandoned. "Please, do sit." Now you may sit. You try to slide into the seat with grace. Instead, your coat catches on the armrest and you half fold like a marionette. The silence after your thud is deafening. "Would you care for tea?" she asks, already ringing the bell. You nod. It's all you can safely do. She sits, she folds her hands, she waits. This is the part where you're meant to start a polite, meandering conversation about uncontroversial topics like the weather, botanical gardens, or the quality of recent glove imports. But your mind is a tumbleweed. You open your mouth and nothing. She blinks slowly. You mumble something about how fine the house is. She nods. It's drafty in winter. You panic. I love drafts. What? You've already lost the room. The tea cart rattles in. A maid pours tea with the focus of a chemist. Your cup is filled. It trembles slightly as you lift it. You're holding it wrong. You know you're holding it wrong. Is it thumb on the rim? No. That's modern. Fingers through the handle? No. Pinch it like a delicate relic? Too late. You've committed to this weird crab claw grip, and now everyone has seen it. You try to sip. The tea is too hot. You burn your tongue. Congratulations. You've made it 3 minutes into the parlor and have already insulted the butler, sat uninvited, and declared your love for poor insulation. And you still haven't even met your date? The drawing room hushes again. Outside, a horse clip-clops past the window. The fire gives a subdued crackle, as though it too is holding its breath. You're staring into your teacup, which is both a comfort and a curse. You can't drink it, burned tongue. You can't set it down, no saucer in sight. And your arm is trembling like you're performing a seance. Then, from the far doorway, footsteps. Light, deliberate, and distressingly composed. You look up. There they are, your date, clad in perfectly starched elegance, embroidered somewhere between restraint and romance, and with a gaze that seems to measure your soul with a tape marked in etiquette. They enter the room with such grace, you momentarily forget how to blink. You try to rise. Again. This time, you nearly knock over the tea table. "Good evening," they say, smiling softly. Your mouth opens. No sound. You nod with the enthusiasm of a slightly concussed footman. They take a seat across from you, hands folded, posture flawless. You follow suit, except your posture screams lost confidence at customs. You attempt to mirror their elegance and end up resembling a nervous oboe. Then comes the worst part. Silence. Victorian courtship wasn't built for chemistry. It was built for restraint, observation, and saying absolutely nothing of importance in the most graceful way possible. You're not supposed to talk politics, or money, or feelings. You're allowed, maybe, to ask about their needlework, or their opinion on ferns. You scramble. "So do you enjoy air?" They blink. You internally combust. They smile politely. "I do appreciate a strong breeze during the season." "What does that mean?" You nod like it's profound. "Yes, breezes. So breezy." You sip your tea again, still lava, and nearly choke. Your date turns to the piano. "Would you care to hear something?" "Absolutely not," you think, but you smile and say, "Of course." They rise, glide to the piano, and begin to play. Now, here's where things get dangerous. In Victorian society, musical ability was more than a hobby. It was a coded message. A woman playing Schumann softly hinted at emotional depth. A man pounding out Bach might be seen as a bit too bold. Your date, however, plays Liszt, passionate, technical, almost rude in its excellence. You try to look enraptured. You end up looking like you've misplaced your eyebrows. The song ends. You clap. Too loudly, one beat too late. They glance at you. You shrink an inch. Historians still argue whether parlor music was a sincere artistic offering or just another form of competitive peacocking, but in either case, you just failed to properly appreciate it. You attempt to compliment, "You play fast." They nod. That was Liszt's Un sospiro. You pretend you knew that. It's your turn to say something meaningful now. Something delicate, literary, perhaps about the piece's emotional nuance. Instead, you hear yourself say, "I also once played something on the spoons." The butler coughs behind you. It sounds suspiciously like judgment. Your date tilts their head. How charming. You both know it. They return to their chair, and again there's silence. You catch a glimpse of the mother in the corner, pretending to read but clearly eavesdropping with the intensity of a hawk at high tea. Even the dog under the chaise longue is judging you. Your date smiles again. "Do you care for parlor games?" You pause. This feels like a trap. But you say yes. You always say yes. And that's where the real trouble begins. The moment you agree to parlor games, something shifts. Your date's mother puts down her book, she wasn't reading it anyway, and rings a little silver bell. A maid appears instantly, as if summoned from the wallpaper. Within moments, the furniture is rearranged, footstools are scooted aside, and a table emerges from the shadows with the quiet efficiency of a ghostly stagehand. You're not just here for tea anymore. You're participating. Perhaps a round of the minister's cat, someone suggests. You nod even though you don't know what that is. You're banking on it involving a real cat. It does not. The minister's cat is a Victorian alphabet game where each player in turn must describe the minister's cat with an adjective beginning with the next letter of the alphabet. You learn this the hard way when the person to your left announces, "The minister's cat is an amiable cat." Your brain freezes. The next person, The minister's cat is a boisterous cat. You start to sweat. You are the third player. Your letter is C. Your mind offers creepy, crunchy, and cursed, none of which feel acceptable. The minister's cat is a charming cat, you mumble. Polite nods, barely. You pass the round, but the pressure only increases. Next comes charades, except not the fun, flailing kind. No, these are literary charades. You're expected to mime multi-syllabic book titles from 200 years ago. Your clue? The Canterbury Tales. You mime a tale. Maybe you flap your arms. You crouch. Someone guesses the Duckling's Redemption. It's going terribly. Your date guesses correctly, somehow, which is worse. Now it looks like you two planned it, which is very improper. Chaperones murmur. The butler narrows his eyes. Historians still debate whether these games were genuinely fun or simply well-disguised exams in social positioning. Either way, you're failing. Next game, consequences. You're handed paper and a pencil, no erasers. You must secretly write the name of a man, fold the paper, pass it. Then a woman's name, fold, pass. Then how they met. Then what he said. Then what she said. Then the consequence. Then the world's opinion. The papers are opened. Someone reads, Mr. Spindle met Miss Haversmith at a séance. He said, your aura smells of ham. She said, don't talk to me. The consequence was they eloped via balloon. The world said, about time. Polite laughter ripples through the room. Then your sheet is read. You had written, Lord Parsnip met Miss Knife. Oh no. You panic wrote knife because you forgot any real Victorian surnames. The result? He said. I like ducks. She said, quite. The consequence was eternal silence. The world said, what a tragedy. Silence. Then someone coughs. A chuckle. Your date lets out a modest laugh, but their eyes are politely confused. You wish the earth would open and deliver you to a simpler time, like the plague years. To wrap up the games, the group turns to forfeits, where everyone offers a personal item to a designated judge, who then challenges each person to earn it back through some mortifying social task. You hand over your handkerchief. Grave error. When your turn comes, you're told you must stand in the middle of the room and recite a compliment to the person sitting farthest from you, which, of course, is your date. You clear your throat. You panic. You consider faking a coughing fit. But you say it. Your presence is like a, well-managed conservatory. There is silence. Then, a slow clap from the piano teacher in the corner. You sit down again, heart hammering. You have just flirted. Badly, publicly, while being judged by an entire Victorian household. But worse, you might have succeeded. The room settles again, the game's concluded, but the aftermath lingers. There's that post-performance quiet, that thin hush where everyone pretends they weren't just laughing at each other 5 minutes ago. You glance toward your date, who now avoids your eyes by studying the embroidery on their sleeve, and realize you've crossed some invisible line. A boundary was brushed, a flirtation occurred, or maybe a social crime. Hard to tell in this era. The maid reappears with a fresh tea tray, mercifully breaking the tension. More cups are poured. The sugar tongs return. You're determined to redeem yourself this time. You reach for the tongs with a level of focus typically reserved for diffusing explosives. You pluck a cube, drop it into your tea, and It splashes. Loudly. A single drop lands on the tablecloth. No one says anything, but everyone sees it. Your date, ever poised, gently stirs their own cup without incident. They glance up, their expression unreadable, somewhere between pity and bemusement. You smile weakly, like a child who just dropped their ice cream in church. And then, salvation. Conversation resumes. Small talk, safe topics, garden arrangements, the new ironwork in Hyde Park. Someone brings up the scandalously colored lilies at last week's flower show. You try to participate. You try so hard. Yes, lilies, you say. Always so, petal forward. A beat. Your date stifles a laugh, not cruelly, but clearly. Still, you press on. This is your window, your chance to recover. Do you enjoy botany? You ask. I do, they reply. I keep a pressed flower book. Have you ever tried? You nod. Oh, all the time. I recently flattened a rose between two encyclopedias. Technically true, though the encyclopedias were on the floor and the rose was something you accidentally stepped on. They smile anyway, encouraging, warm. Which would be nice, except your next thought is that you're sweating again, that your teacup is empty, that your tongue still hurts. You shift to another subject. Do you enjoy reading? A safe question, excellent move. I do, they say. Lately I've been reading Miss Braddon, very atmospheric. You make a noise that implies agreement, and quickly try to remember if Miss Braddon writes romance or murders or gardening manuals. I'm a fan of all books, you say vaguely, especially the long ones. There's a pause. Then your date tilts their head. Really? I thought I saw your lips moving during charades. You flush. A soft jab. But it's gentle, teasing, possibly flirtatious. Historians still argue whether Victorian flirting was intentional or simply the accidental byproduct of prolonged eye contact and mutual boredom. Either way, this feels like the something. You take a breath, you feel good, almost composed, and the butler appears. He clears his throat, the universal signal for social correction incoming. He leans toward your date and whispers something. They nod. He vanishes like an etiquette ghost. Your date rises. I promised Mama I'd check on the baby canaries before dinner. Would you care to accompany me? Your heart leaps. A garden stroll, an aviary, something with less mahogany and fewer forks. You nod. Of course. Your date exits to fetch a wrap. You stand. The mother watches. She doesn't speak, just watches. Her eyes are like tightrope wire. You smile politely. She nods once. Approval? Warning? Maybe just a twitch. You don't ask. Because your entire future may now depend on how gracefully you walk 20 feet beside a person holding a birdcage. And that's the most romantic thing that's happened all night? You're back on your feet, once again adjusting layers that refuse to cooperate. Your collar feels tighter now, perhaps in anticipation, or maybe because you exhaled wrong. Either way, you follow your date down a hallway lined with ancestral oil portraits that seem to whisper, "Don't embarrass us further." The house is quiet, save for the faint ticking of some hidden grandfather clock that seems to be judging your pace. You pass a console table stacked with maritime-themed paperweights and a single vase of wilting hydrangeas. Somehow even the flowers seem disappointed in you. You exit into the conservatory, a glass-domed extension filled with ferns, damp stone tiles, and exactly the kind of decorative discomfort the Victorians loved. It's humid in here, like a hothouse for regrets. Your date moves with practiced ease, lifting the edge of their garment just enough to step over a trailing vine. Then you see it, the aviary. It's smaller than expected, just a round iron stand near the window with two tiny nervous canaries inside. They flit and chirp as your date approaches, cooing softly in a way that clearly works better on birds than on people. You watch as they open the little latch and gently refill a water dish. It's all very tender, intimate even. I keep them in pairs, they explain. They don't thrive alone. You nod sagely, as though you too have first-hand experience with canary emotional health. They sing most in the morning, they continue, eyes still on the birds, but only if the air is still. There's something fragile in their voice, like a line from a romantic novel they half believe. Or perhaps they're testing you for sentiment. You lean slightly closer. Do you name them? They smile. No, naming makes grief harder. You nod, unsure if you're now supposed to share something deeply emotional or just look quietly poetic. To fill the space, you glance around for conversation material. You spot a potted plant. This is a very healthy, fern? It's actually a staghorn moss, they say gently. A gift from my cousin in Edinburgh. You nod. Of course it is. Historians still debate whether Victorian conservatories were meant for relaxation, courtship, or competitive exotic plant ownership. Whatever the truth, you're now stuck between two fidgeting birds, a wall of condensation, and the growing realization that your boots are slightly too squeaky for romance. Then comes the most dangerous phrase in the entire social script. Shall we walk? You agree, naturally. You would walk into a trench if it meant redeeming your spoon comment from earlier. Out you go into the back garden. It's dusk now. The sky glows faintly pink over hedgerows trimmed into anxiety-inducing perfection. The path winds between rose bushes and a small ornamental pond, its surface disturbed only by the occasional mosquito and the ghosts of failed suitors. You stroll side by side, not quite touching, but close enough to share the silence. Your date inhales deeply. Do you enjoy the evening air? You smile. Love it. Air is one of my top preferences. You wince. It was meant to be charming. It came out like a medical condition. Still, they laugh. A soft, genuine thing. You're unlike most people who call here, they say. Usually it's all gloves and grammar and quotes from the Lady of Shalott. You chuckle, emboldened. Well, I left my Tennyson in the carriage. This earns another smile. The moment stretches. Comfortably now. You're walking in rhythm. Even your coat has stopped betraying you, and for the first time tonight your lungs don't feel compressed by either fashion or fear. And then you turn a corner and nearly walk into the chaperone. Aunt Clairemont, still here, still watching. She raises an eyebrow. Your date sighs softly. She tends to appear whenever there's moonlight. You offer a polite bow. She does not return it. The spell breaks. The stroll ends. You are escorted back inside before your shadow dares to overlap with anyone else's. Still, for a moment, you almost pulled it off. You're back indoors now, blinking as your eyes adjust from soft twilight to candlelit precision. The drawing room has been subtly reset. Chairs realigned, cushions plumped, scandal neatly smoothed away. The fire crackles with slightly more urgency, as if eager to roast you for your crimes against conversational decorum. Your date steps away to remove their wrap. Aunt Clarimond settles herself near the hearth like a final boss, knitting something that might be a hat or a hex. You perch on the edge of your seat, wondering if you're meant to make more small talk, apologize for breathing near the aviary, or just quietly dissolve into the upholstery. But before you can decide, your date turns, a playful glint in their eye. "Shall we try the fan language?" they ask. Your blood runs cold, because yes, the fan language, that delightful piece of pseudo-Victorian semiotics, is supposedly how gentlefolk conveyed secret romantic messages across a crowded room. But you have no idea what any of it means. You vaguely remember something about tapping the fan, meaning "I'm married," and holding it near the cheek, meaning "please leave me forever." Or was it the opposite? Historians still argue whether fan flirting was genuinely practiced or simply a myth bolstered by etiquette manuals with too much time on their hands. Your date opens their fan. It's painted with tiny birds and vines and, alarmingly, eyes. They flick it open and flutter it near their chest. You panic. What does that mean? My heart is open. You dropped scone on yourself. You pretend to understand and respond by dramatically wafting your hand near your temple, like you're either intrigued or fending off a fainting spell. A pause, then grin. Is that a proposal or a weather report? You both laugh, and just like that, the tension lifts. "Well," they say, "I believe that meant you're feeling faint from admiration." You nod. "Quite possibly, or I'm just not used to this much humidity and pressure." Their laughter is quiet but real. Across the room, Aunt Clarimond does not laugh. Her knitting needles click ominously. But your date is unfazed. They flick their fan shut with a confident snap. "You know," they say, settling beside you on the settee, "I don't actually believe in all that fan nonsense." You smile. "Good. I was about to start flapping Morse code." That earns you a look, half amused, half curious. "You're not like other callers," they murmur, voice low. You feel your face flush. "Because I am not gloved, cultured, or remotely graceful?" Exactly. It takes a moment before you realize they're teasing again. Maybe. A pause stretches between you. Not awkward this time. Just expectant. The room has grown warm. The fire hums. The scent of tea and ash lingers gently. And then, because the gods of Victorian romance demand it, Aunt Clarimond clears her throat. Your date straightens, but only slightly. She speaks without looking up. "I believe it's time for the pianoforte." You blink. Is this a cue? A punishment? Your date glances sideways at you. She means you should play. No. Oh, no. You start to protest, but your mouth has decided to betray you. "Of course," you hear yourself say. "I'd love to." You rise on legs that feel like you've just danced a minuet with a bear. The piano looms, black, lacquered, malevolent. You sit. The bench squeaks. You place your hands on the keys and press down. Gently, a note squeaks. A high one, a weak one, the note equivalent of a kitten sneezing. You try again. A simple melody, something safe. A lullaby? Instead, your fingers slip and you accidentally mash 3 keys at once. It sounds like someone sat on a goose. "Time," Aunt Clarimond coughs. You recover, sort of. You manage 4 bars of something resembling Greensleeves, if Greensleeves had a head cold and a fear of commitment. Your date is watching, smiling, but not in mockery, in sympathy. You finish the piece, or what's left of it, and let your hands fall to your lap. No one claps, but no one throws you out either. Your date leans in and whispers, "You're braver than most." You murmur, "Because I faced on Clairemont or because I attacked the piano?" They shrug. And somehow, despite the music, despite the fan language, despite every historical misstep you've taken tonight, you're still here. The room is quieter now, heavier, like the candlelit air has thickened with unsaid things. You slide off the piano bench and return to your seat, trying not to trip on the rug's ornamental fringe, hand-woven probably by someone whose life was infinitely more composed than yours. Your date watches you, arms folded lightly, a glimmer of something unreadable behind their eyes, admiration, pity, the pure scientific curiosity of someone watching a moth navigate a chandelier. Before you can interpret it, the maid reappears and wordlessly begins clearing the tea things. You realize, then, how long it's been. The scones are cold. The sugar cubes are slightly melted into their bowl. The fire is now more ember than flame. It's the hour of genteel transitions, the time when guests are either invited to dinner or politely shown the door. And tonight, you don't yet know which you are. You try to look composed, not too eager, not too detached. The exact expression of someone who might stay, but would also understand if there's a sudden outbreak of typhoid that prevents it. Then comes a rustle. Your date rises. Would you care to join me in viewing the family collection? Your brain scrambles. You say yes. Of course you say yes. They lead you to a side hallway, narrower than the rest, lined with oil portraits, sepia photographs, and objects that defy categorization. A small taxidermied bat in a bell jar, a child's bonnet with initials sewn in gold thread, a quill pen in a glass case labeled "Belonged to Lady Orinthia." Briefly, you pause in front of a faded daguerreotype of 2 women in stiff lace and identical expressions. "My great-aunts," your date says. "They once eloped, then returned separately." You nod. That's efficiency. They were banned from card games after that. You grin. "Rebels." "Scandalous," they whisper, but their tone is pleased. You walk on. There's something about this hallway. Its creaking floorboards, its slightly slanted portraits, its heavy drapes pulled just so. That feels like a transitional space, not just from one room to another, but from one phase of the evening to something closer, more honest. Your date stops at a small table with a stack of albums. "This one's from our summer in Brighton," they say, flipping it open. "I nearly drowned in 2 inches of water. Aunt Clairemont said it built character." You smile. "I once fell into a pond trying to retrieve a hat," you say. "Mine. It was windy." They pause. You're either very unlucky or very determined. You consider possibly both. Then it happens. They look at you. Not the polite glance from earlier, not the sidelong appraisals. A real look. Direct, unblinking. "You're not what I expected," they say softly. "Neither are you, you want to say. You were hoping to survive this night without burning your tongue, offending 3 social tiers, and flubbing your way through Greensleeves. But now, here you are, still standing, still being looked at. I hope that's not a terrible thing," you say. It's mud. A silence forms. But this time it feels less like a void and more like a warm, shaded alcove. And Claremont does not appear. The butler does not clear his throat. It is just you and your date, and the soft weight of the moment between you. Then they laugh, gently, almost to themselves. I do think you might be my most memorable caller. You lean closer. I'd settle for least disastrous. They tilt their head. You'll have to try again if you want to win that title. It's a tease, but it's also an invitation. And just like that, your failures become footnotes. The fan language, the charades, the tea spill, the piano. Every awkward slip, now part of something faintly resembling affection? A memory, blooming. You trail behind your date as they close the photo album, fingers brushing the worn leather cover like it holds a story too fragile to retell out loud. They walk ahead, just a step or two, leading you through a narrow corridor, walls lined with ancestral sketches, a few military medals in dusty frames, and a truly massive embroidered cushion that simply says, Fortitude in bold threadwork. You don't know where you're going now, and honestly, you don't care. Something has shifted. The air feels lighter. The stakes feel, well, still high, but less like an execution and more like an audition for a charming role you never trained for. This way, your date says quietly, and you follow without hesitation. You arrive at a modest sitting room, not as grand as the drawing room, not as stiff either. This one has scuffed floorboards, overstuffed chairs, a sleepy hound curled by the fire, and a faint smell of cloves and tobacco that clings to the wallpaper. This is where we usually end the evening, they say, motioning for you to sit. You do, carefully. You've learned to test all Victorian furniture for unexpected springs and wobbly legs. This chair holds. A small miracle. They settle in across from you. Not too close, not too far. There's a teacup already waiting, fresh, mercifully lukewarm. You sip. No burns this time. We don't often have guests in here, they add, almost as an afterthought. You raise an eyebrow. So, I've breached a sacred parlor perimeter? They smile. You've survived this long, might as well make it official. You exhale. Relax. At last. But then, you spot it. On the table between you, the guest book. An open leather volume, ink pen resting diagonally, pages filled with exquisite cursive entries like "A most charming afternoon, thank you," and "Grateful for the company and the violin sonata." And now, it's your turn. Your date gestures lightly. Feel free to leave a note. You panic? Because the guest book is a trap? A lovely, monogrammed social landmine of a trap. What do you write? Something poetic? Something dry? Something that doesn't hint at the multiple etiquette infractions you've committed since sunset? You pick up the pen, dip it in the ink, pause, think. Finally, you write. Thank you for the music, the moss, and the mercy. Hope to earn another cup someday. You sign it with your name and a small, entirely invented flourish. Your date leans over to read it, slowly, smiling. It's the only entry with moss, they say. Well done. You beam. They close the book gently and set it aside. And then you realize you've done it. Somehow, against every rule, expectation, and trembling teacup, you've survived this date. And not only that, you might have impressed someone. There's a beat of silence as the fire settles. Then, so they say, fingers toying with a stray ribbon on the chair. What happens next in your typical courtship rituals? You blink. Ah, well, usually I trip on the doorstep and vanish into the night. They laugh, traditional. You laugh too. But there's an ache behind it, because now comes the part you've been dreading. The goodbye. Because Victorian goodbyes weren't just a handshake and a wave. They were an art form, a choreography of phrases, bows, timed exits, and worst of all, the potential of hand-kissing, which carries more rules than a duel. You both stand, slowly, like actors exiting a stage. You're back in the hallway now. The butler appears out of thin air. Of course he does. You retrieve your coat, your hat, still slightly bent. You nod to Aunt Clarimond, who hasn't blinked since tea, and then your date walks you to the door. You pause, they pause. One breath, two. If you find yourself in possession of another rose, they say, I hope you'll let it flatten in safer hands. You grin. If I do, you say, it's yours. A moment. Stillness, almost a kiss. Not quite. Instead, a smile. A nod. You descend the steps as the door slowly closes behind you. The night air hits your face. You survived. Barely. The door clicks shut behind you with a softness that feels final. You stand for a moment at the base of the townhouse steps, letting the night settle around your shoulders like a borrowed shawl. The street is mostly empty, slamplit, fog-wrapped, and vaguely conspiratorial. A cat slinks between railings. Somewhere, distantly, someone is whistling a tune that doesn't know where it's going. And you're trying to absorb the fact that you just endured, and possibly even enjoyed, a full Victorian courtship ritual without combusting on the spot. The cold air stings your lungs in a refreshing sort of way. Your coat still doesn't sit quite right on your shoulders. Your gloves are long gone, but your heart's thumping with something that feels less like survival panic and more like triumph. You begin the walk to where the carriage is meant to collect you, slowly, reflectively, carefully, because one twisted ankle on a cobblestone and you'll go down like a tragic subplot in a Dickens novel. You reach the corner and realize something peculiar. You're smiling. Despite the awkward silences, the piano debacle, the fan-hanging meltdown, the share-induced public shame, the over-sugared tea, you somehow emerged on the other side, not just intact, but maybe even invited back. You lean against a lamppost and let that truth wash over you. You, Victorian parlor survivor, your mind replays fragments of the evening, the canaries, the fern, moss, still unclear, the smothered laugh at your literary incompetence, the ghost of a smile as you signed the guest book, the way your date looked at you when you weren't trying to be clever, just you. Historians still debate whether romantic success in the 19th century relied more on charm or sheer endurance. But either way, you've just completed the full gauntlet. Your reverie is broken by the sound of hooves. The carriage arrives finally. The driver looks down at you with a tired expression that says he's seen all kinds of suitors, nervous ones, drunk ones, desperate ones, and now apparently ones like you. You climb in. This time, the ride feels different. You're jostled by the same potholes. The same window won't close properly. The same velvet smells faintly of old cigars and damp wool. But now the chaos feels earned. You lean back. You let your head rest against the side and close your eyes. For a moment, you imagine what the next visit might look like. A slightly more confident knock, a better grip on the sugar tongs, a pre-approved charade's clue, maybe even a walk in the garden without a guardian shadowing your every step. You chuckle softly in the dark. Outside, gas lamps flicker past. Inside, your body begins to loosen from the relentless etiquette posture you've been clenched in all evening. You made it, and not just physically. You somehow managed to wobble really, into an impossibly delicate world and leave a faint, slightly lopsided imprint. You were supposed to just survive one date. But what if that was the beginning? You open your eyes again and realize you're almost home. The carriage slows, the driver coughs, the wheels creak. You step out, feet touching familiar stone. The night is colder now, but your coat feels warmer. You glance once back at the road you came from, still quiet, still wrapped in fog. And just before you reach your door, you find something tucked into your pocket. It's a card. Your date's crest, just that, no message. But on the back, faintly scrawled, "If you find another story worth sharing, bring it with you." You pocket it again, let yourself inside, and smile. Because for all your fears about lasting a single date, you might have just earned the chance for a second. You wake up the next morning in a strange sort of daze, half memory, half dream, all corset-induced soreness. Sunlight filters weakly through your curtain, casting drowsy patterns on the floor. The smell of dust and yesterday's cologne still clings to your coat, now draped unceremoniously over the back of a chair. One glove has returned, the other is probably still in the underworld. You sit up slowly. Your brain replays snippets of last night like out-of-order postcards. A spilled tea, a fan flicked too early, a crooked smile from someone who saw all of it and somehow didn't vanish in horror. You touch the pocket where the cards still rest. It wasn't a love letter, exactly. Just a crest, a scribbled note. A doorway cracked open. You rise, shuffle toward the mirror, and stare at the sleep-crushed version of yourself. Hair like you were attacked by a hedgehog, shirt buttons misaligned, a faint hint of lavender soap. And fear. And yet, you're grinning because you did it. You endured every unspoken rule, every layered expectation, every silent test wrapped in lace and etiquette. You faced the butler, Aunt Clarimond, and a piano that probably hates you, and you came out the other side not as a polished suitor, but as yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Later that morning, you're back in semi-modern clothes, still vaguely stiff, still over-accessorized, but at least breathable. You sit at your writing desk and pull out a fresh sheet of thick, slightly scented paper. A thank you note. That's the next step. You think carefully before writing, because this isn't just about manners. It's another moment, another chance, another opportunity to lean into the version of yourself that survived a parlor date and left something behind that wasn't a stain or a scandal. You begin, "To my most gracious host, thank you for the music, the tea, and the merciful pause between social expectations. I left with more than I arrived with, mainly stories, and perhaps one feather that got stuck in my collar. You pause, then add, I do hope your canaries sing today, and that the staghorn moss continues to thrive in my absence. Fondly, you stop again. Not fondly, that's too much. Or is it? You cross it out and go with a simple, yours in gratitude. You sign your name and sit back. There's still ink drying, but your thoughts are already drifting forward. To the next time, the next parlor, the next awkward sentence you'll blurt out that somehow, against all odds, will make someone smile again. You seal the note. You press your signet, yes, you have one, borrowed or otherwise, into the wax. And with that you've done something few people in any era manage, followed up after a good date. Historians still argue whether Victorian romances succeeded because of letter writing, shared values, or just mutual tolerance of uncomfortable furniture. But in your case, it may come down to this. You showed up, you stayed, you tried, and despite every hilarious, humbling, and horrifying misstep, you're still welcome. A week passes. Long enough for the adrenaline to fade, but not so long that your mind lets you forget a single awkward moment. You find yourself waking in the middle of the night, wondering if you really did say, "petal forward" out loud. You did. You reread your thank you note more than once before finally sending it. You debated adding a line about the fan language, then removed it. You almost drew a tiny bird in the corner, then decided that would make you look unwell. Restraint wins. The reply comes 3 days later. Not from your date, but from their mother. It's a folded note, sealed in pale green wax, written in the kind of cursive that implies you should have gone to boarding school. Your visit was memorable. The company was unconventional, the piano unforgettable. We were, above all, entertained. You are welcome to call again, though I recommend gloves next time. Respectfully, Lady Priscilla W. You read it twice. Entertained. The word echoes in your brain like a polite drumbeat. Not exactly a compliment, but not a rejection either. You allow yourself a small, cautious fist pump. Later that evening you receive a second envelope, smaller, less formal. Inside, there's a scrap of notepaper. Not perfumed, not crested, just 6 words in hurried handwriting. My turn to spill the tea. No signature. You know who it's from. You sit back in your chair, grinning at the paper like it just confessed to a crime you're eager to help cover up. You fold it carefully, place it beside the card from the first night, your tiny, treasured collection of absurdly formal flirtation. You wonder what the next visit will bring. Will there be more music, a debate about ferns, another brush with Aunt Clarimonde's soul-searing glare? You almost hope so. And then, just as you're drifting into another daydream, you hear a knock, unmistakable. Not the delivery boy, not a neighbor. You go to the door, and there, standing in slightly more casual attire, if such a thing exists in this century, is your date. No coat, no fan, just a slightly sheepish smile and a paper parcel under one arm. I owe you a second round, they say, holding it up. You raise an eyebrow. What is it? They grin. Lemon scones. I've made improvements. You step aside. The parlor is ready. You usher them in with a flourish that's part theatrical, part stunned disbelief. The door closes behind you, and for a brief moment the house seems to exhale. They step over the threshold like it's no big deal, like they weren't a full Regency drama just 1 week ago. No gloves, no chaperone, no sudden need to discuss the price of iron railings in Bath. Just them, and the lemon scones. The bundle is warm in their hands, wrapped in a simple cloth that smells like citrus and the very distant memory of an over-ambitious Victorian recipe. You made these, you ask, still suspicious? Heath assistants, they admit. From the cook, but the lemons were selected by me personally. Scandalous. They grin. She warned me they'd come out uneven. Then we have something in common. You guide them to the small sitting room, your version of neutral ground. The fire is lit, a low, comforting crackle. 2 cups already on the table, because some part of you dared to hope. You unwrap the scones together like a team disarming a pastry bomb. Crumbs scatter. One scone leans precariously. Another has a dent, like it tried to fight a spoon and lost. They look perfect, you lie. Don't patronize them, they reply. They've been through enough. You bite in. It's good, really good. The lemon sharp, the center just barely underdone, the exact kind of imperfect that says real effort. You glance over and see them watching you, not with the stiff curiosity of last week, but with relaxed amusement. So, you say between bites, what scandal have you escaped to be here? They pretend to think. Technically, I meant to be at a recital, something long, something involving reeds, and instead, pastry crimes with you. A pause. Then, almost shyly, worth it? You sip your tea, pleased. It's not about seduction, or the choreography of fans, or even which fork to use anymore. This is quieter, warmer, and yet no less meaningful. They lean back. You know, they say, I haven't stopped thinking about that game of charades. Oh no. The duck mime, they continue. Legendary. You bury your face in your sleeve. I blacked it out for a reason. They're still talking about it, they add, mock serious. You groan. I think you elevated poultry-based performance to an art form. You wave your hand. Stop. I'm blushing and the lemon can't save me. They laugh. Not a composed chuckle, a real, eyes closed, full belly laugh. It fills the room like music. You sit in the comfort of that sound, letting it wrap around you like a blanket stitched from all the missteps and almosts and accidental glories of your first encounter. Historians still argue whether second dates existed in Victorian society the way we think of them now. Often courtships were just elongated interviews conducted under surveillance. But tonight, in this little room, with lopsided scones and shared jokes, you're rewriting that script. You finish your tea. They reach for another scone, pause, then offer it to you instead. A tiny, quiet gesture. You take it, and for the first time, neither of you feels like a guest anymore. The fire has burned low, casting long, sleepy shadows that flicker across the carpet like lazy thoughts. The last crumbs of lemon scone cling to the edge of your plate. Tea's long gone cold, but neither of you notices. You're both sunk into the kind of comfortable quiet that takes hours, or the right person, to achieve. No more proving, no more performing, just presence. Your date gazes into the flames for a moment, then turns to you, speaking softly. Do you think we're terribly inappropriate? You blink. Compared to who? They smile. Compared to what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, this is hardly a sanctioned courtship. There was no formal invitation, no lace gloves. I arrived without a chaperone, for heaven's sake. You gesture to the lopsided scones, and baked goods were exchanged? Benar, scandal, silence. Then, more seriously, but I liked this better. You nod, me too, and you mean it. Because there's something sweeter than sugar cubes in this moment. Something that didn't exist in that grand parlor with its ticking clocks and fan-signaled innuendo. There's no performance now, just a shared understanding that somehow, against every tightly wound social norm, something real has begun. They lean their elbow on the armrest, chin in hand. I used to think I needed to marry someone who could quote poetry and eat a scone without making a mess. You raise a brow. I'm 2 for 2 on that list, just not in the right direction. They laugh again, but this time it's tinged with something gentler. I think I needed someone who'd mime a duck in front of strangers and still show up the next day. You feel something flutter in your chest, softer than excitement, heavier than luck. Something that feels like the first brick of trust being set in place. You don't say anything, you don't need to. They reach into their coat and pull out a small book, not wrapped, not announced, just offered. I found this in our attic, they say. It belonged to one of my great aunts, the one who eloped twice. You take the book. It's thin, bound in worn leather. Inside, pressed between pages, are dozens of faded flower specimens. Ferns. Tiny blossoms. A few are too far gone to identify. You look up. She never labeled them, they say, just collected things she didn't want to forget. You flip to the final page. A blank space. You glance back at them. I thought maybe you'd add something. You don't know what to say, so you nod. Because what do you call the moment where someone hands you their family's memory book and asks you to write the next entry? The candle sputters, the fire sighs, and for the first time you don't feel like you've survived a date. You feel like you've arrived at something. The room grows quieter still. The fire settles into soft embers. The scones are gone, the teacups empty, and the space between you hums with a peace too delicate to disturb. You sit together, neither rushing to speak. The silence stretches like a ribbon, unfurling gently without tension. Outside, the world has gone still. The streets are hushed, the lamps flickering like thoughts just before sleep. You watch the flames soften, their light dancing across the edges of the pressed flower book, now resting gently in your lap. Your fingers trace its leather cover, absorbing its quiet weight, its history. Beside you, their presence is steady, no longer tentative. There's no pressure now, no etiquette test to pass, no perfect phrase to say. Just this shared breath, this flicker of something warm between two people who didn't know how to get it right, but kept showing up anyway. The night doesn't ask for a grand ending, only this stillness, this kindness, this earned quiet. You close your eyes. You let the evening drift around you like a soft cloak, and just before sleep folds itself gently over your shoulders, you feel it again, that sense of having been seen, not perfectly, but truly. And in this world of stiff collars and scripted dances, that might just be the rarest thing of all. Good night.